Marcus Chun had been captive 804 for 3 years, 7 months, and 14 days. The number tattooed on his forearm served as his only identity in the Vorthak prison complex that orbited the gas giant Kepler 442b. He no longer remembered what crime had landed him here, only that Earth's government had sold him and thousands of other humans to alien slave traders to pay off mounting debts. The Vorthak were efficient captors, standing 8 feet tall with chitinous exoskeletons, and for arms, they treated their prisoners like livestock. Each morning, the electromagnetic barriers dropped, and prisoners shuffled to their assigned workstations. Mining operations, waste processing, atmospheric scrubbing, whatever kept their massive prison ships running smoothly. Marcus worked in the engine compartments, crawling through spaces too narrow for Vorthak bodies. His small human frame made him valuable for maintenance work that larger alien species couldn't perform. The irony wasn't lost on him that his captors needed the very beings they considered inferior. The other prisoners came from dozens of different worlds. There were the insectoid Zephyrians with their compound eyes and clicking mandibles, the hulking Gorvani, whose rocky skin made them perfect for heavy labor, even a few of the crystalline Luxari, whose bodies could channel energy, but who had fallen from grace in their rigid society. What surprised Marcus most was how the aliens viewed humans. Where other species had natural advantages, strength, size, specialized abilities, humans seemed unremarkable. The Vorthak guards often joked that humans were the galactic equivalent of maintenance tools, useful for getting into tight spots, but otherwise forgettable. This changed everything the day the Dragons arrived. Marcus was deep in a coolant shaft when the first explosion shook the ship. Emergency klaxons blared as the prison vessel shuddered under some massive impact. Through the maintenance tunnels, he could hear screaming in a dozen different languages as prisoners and guards alike tried to understand what was happening. The second explosion knocked out primary power. Emergency lighting bathed everything in a sickly red glow as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Marcus pulled himself through the shaft toward the main corridor, his engineers training kicking in automatically. Whatever was attacking them had taken out the primary fusion reactor. When he emerged into the corridor, chaos greeted him. Vorthak guards ran past, their forearms clutching plasma weapons as they shouted orders in their harsh, clicking language. Prisoners huddled against walls, many injured from falling debris. The air tasted of ozone and burning metal. A third explosion, closer this time, sent Marcus sprawling. Through a nearby viewport, he caught his first glimpse of their attackers. Ships unlike anything in his xenobiology databases swept past the prison vessel. Sleek, organic curves suggested they were grown rather than built. Most striking were the creatures piloting them. Dragons. Actual dragons. Not the mythical beast from Earth's legends, but close enough to trigger something deep in Marcus's genetic memory. They were massive beings with scaled hides that shifted color like oil on water. Their ships, if they could be called ships, seemed to be living creatures themselves, all flowing lines and what looked like breathing membranes. The dragon vessels moved with an intelligence that spoke of centuries of spaceflight evolution. They darted between the Vorthak escort ships, their weapon systems firing coherent energy beams that sliced through armor plating like paper. The prison ship's defenses, designed to keep prisoners in rather than attackers out, proved laughably inadequate. Marcus pressed himself against the viewport as one dragon ship swept close enough for him to see its pilot. The creature was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Its scales caught the light from distant stars, creating patterns that seemed to shift and dance. Most alien species Marcus had encountered were either crude like the Vorthak or coldly efficient like the Luxari. These dragons radiated something else entirely. Ancient wisdom coupled with barely contained power. A Vorthak guard spotted Marcus at the viewport and barked an order in the universal translator implant all prisoners received. Captive 804, return to your cell immediately. Marcus started to comply, then stopped. 3 years of mindless obedience warred with something else rising in his chest. These dragons were attacking his captors. Maybe for the first time since his imprisonment, someone was fighting back against the species that had turned sentient beings into property. The guard raised his plasma weapon, but another explosion sent him stumbling. Emergency bulkheads began slamming shut as the ship's computer tried to contain what it perceived as hull breaches. Marcus realized he had moments before he'd be trapped in this section. Instead of heading toward the prisoner quarters, he ran deeper into the ship. The engineering section was in complete chaos. Vorthack technicians struggled to repair damage, while automated systems announced critical failures in multiple languages. Marcus's 3 years of maintenance work had given him an intimate knowledge of the ship's layout. He knew exactly where to go. The main computer core sat behind multiple security barriers, but the explosions had damaged the primary access controls. Marcus squeezed through a gap in the emergency bulkhead that would have been impossible for a larger species to navigate. His human flexibility, the very trait that made him valuable as a maintenance worker, now served a different purpose. The computer core hummed with activity as it tried to coordinate the ship's defenses. Marcus had been working on these systems for years, learning their protocols through careful observation. The Vorthack had never worried about prisoner access because they assumed their captives lacked the intelligence to understand the technology. They were wrong. Marcus's fingers flew over the holographic interface. His engineering background from Earth, combined with 3 years of forced apprenticeship, had given him insights the Vorthack never suspected. He began systematically shutting down defensive systems while uploading a message to the emergency beacon. The message was simple: human prisoner requesting assistance. Disabling defensive systems. Coordinates follow. He transmitted it on all frequencies, hoping the dragons had translation protocols. Then, he began the delicate work of making the Vorthack ship as vulnerable as possible without killing everyone aboard. Weapons systems went offline first. Then, the shield generators. Marcus left life support running, but disabled the engines, effectively stranding the prison ship. If the dragons wanted to board and take prisoners, they'd have plenty of opportunity. A new explosion, much closer this time, suggested his message had been received. Through the ship's internal sensors, Marcus watched dragon boarding pods attached to the hull like metallic seeds. Cutting tools made quick work of the outer armor, and the dragons poured inside. What followed wasn't the brutal massacre Marcus had expected. The dragons moved through the ship with surgical precision, neutralizing Vorthack guards without killing them unnecessarily. Their weapons seemed designed to stun rather than destroy, suggesting these weren't simple raiders, but something more sophisticated. Marcus made his way toward the main prisoner quarters, where most of the ship's captives had been herded for safety. The dragons had reached this section as well, and he arrived to witness something extraordinary. The lead dragon, larger than the others with scales that seemed to contain tiny stars, was speaking to the prisoners. Not in the harsh clicks of Vorthack or the efficient tones of Luxari, but in a melodious language that somehow conveyed meaning without translation implants. "We are the Draconic Concordat," the creature said, its voice carrying harmonics that made the words feel important. "We have monitored the slave trade in this sector for many cycles. Today we end it." The prisoners stared in amazement. Many had never seen their captors challenged, let alone defeated. The Vorthack guards, those who survived the initial assault, had been efficiently neutralized and restrained with some kind of energy binding. Marcus stepped forward, knowing this moment would define everything that came next. "I'm the one who disabled the ship's defenses." Human designation Marcus Chun, prisoner identification 804. The dragon leader turned its attention to him, and Marcus felt the weight of an intelligence far older and deeper than anything he'd encountered. Those eyes held the knowledge of stars and the patience of geological time. "You chose to help strangers rather than flee when opportunity presented itself," the dragon observed. "This speaks to the character your species claims, but rarely demonstrates." Other dragons moved through the crowd, scanning prisoners with devices that seemed to assess more than just physical condition. Marcus watched as they separated the captives into groups, though the criteria wasn't immediately obvious. "What happens now?" asked a Zephyrian prisoner, its compound eyes reflecting nervousness. The dragon leader gestured to its companions. "Those who wish to return to their home worlds will be transported safely. Those whose worlds no longer exist or who have no place to return may join our crew. We can always use individuals with useful skills and proven courage." Marcus felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. But beneath that was something else, something that would have surprised him if he'd stopped to analyze it. He didn't want to return to Earth. The planet that had sold him into slavery held nothing for him anymore. "What about humans?" he asked. "What happens to my species?" The dragon's expression was difficult to read, but Marcus sensed approval in those ancient eyes. "That depends entirely on what humans choose to make of themselves. Your people are young and often foolish, but today you've shown potential we hadn't previously recognized." Around them, other dragons were treating injured prisoners and beginning the process of cataloging who wanted to go where. Their efficiency spoke of experience with rescue operations, but there was something more personal about their attention to detail. Marcus learned later that the Draconic Concordat had been watching various species for millennia, waiting to see which ones would develop wisdom to match their technological advancement. Most failed the test eventually, becoming either extinct or irrelevant. Humans were still being evaluated. A smaller dragon approached Marcus, its scales shifting from deep blue to silver as it moved. "You understand technology beyond what your captor suspected. Were you an engineer before your imprisonment?" Marcus nodded. "Fusion reactor specialist. I was working on Earth's first-generation starships when the government decided selling people was more profitable than exploring space." "Interesting." The dragon made a note on a device that looked more grown than manufactured. "Would you be willing to examine our vessel's propulsion systems? We're always seeking to understand how different species approach faster-than-light travel." The invitation was casual, but Marcus sensed its significance. These beings were offering him something no human had possessed in decades, a chance to work as an equal rather than a slave or debtor. "I'd be honored," Marcus replied. As the rescue operation continued around them, Marcus began to understand that his 3 years as Captive 804 had been preparation for something far greater. The dragons weren't just raiders or liberators. They were gardeners, cultivating promising species while pruning away those that proved unworthy of the stars. The question was, what would humans prove themselves to be? The dragon leader approached him one final time before the evacuation was complete. "Marcus Chun, you've been offered a place among our technical specialists. But before you accept, understand what this means. You would become the first human to work directly with our people. Your actions would reflect on your entire species." Marcus looked around at the other liberated prisoners. The Zephyrians were chattering excitedly about returning home. The Gorvani were already volunteering for heavy labor roles aboard the dragon ships. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they wanted. But Marcus realized he'd spent 3 years learning to think like a prisoner. Now he needed to remember how to think like a human. Not the humans who had sold him, but the humans who had once looked at stars and dreamed of touching them. "I accept," he said simply. The dragon leader's scales shifted to what Marcus would learn was an expression of satisfaction. "Then, welcome to the Concordat, Engineer Chun. Your Real journey begins now." As Marcus was led toward the dragon transport ships, he caught one last glimpse of his prisoner tattoo, 804. Soon, that number would be replaced with something far more significant. But for now, he was content to leave behind his identity as a captive and step forward into whatever came next. Behind them, the Vorthak prison ship drifted powerless in space. The empire that had built its fortune on the suffering of others would learn that some prisons were easier to escape than to maintain. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, other species would begin hearing stories of dragons that freed slaves and humans who chose courage over survival. The transformation had begun. Marcus's first month aboard the draconic vessel Stellar Harmony challenged everything he thought he knew about physics, biology, and his own limitations. The ship defied human understanding of engineering. Its corridors curved in impossible directions, its walls breathed with organic rhythm, and its power source seemed to draw energy from the fabric of space itself. His quarters were a marvel of adaptive architecture. The walls adjusted their opacity based on his circadian preferences, and the furniture reshaped itself to accommodate human anatomy. Most remarkable was how the ship's living systems learned his habits, providing optimal temperature and humidity before he realized he was uncomfortable. The dragon who had recruited him, named Thessarian in the melodic draconic language, served as his primary guide. Thessarian scales shifted through the spectrum as they communicated, and Marcus gradually learned that the color changes weren't just emotional expressions, but complex data transmission systems. Your species approaches technology through destruction and reconstruction, Thessarian explained as they toured the engineering section. You build machines by breaking raw materials and forcing them into new configurations. We grow our technology through symbiosis and guided evolution. The ship's fusion core wasn't a reactor in any sense Marcus recognized. Instead, a massive crystalline organism pulsed with captured stellar energy, processing matter and energy through biological pathways that achieved fusion efficiency no human engineer had dreamed possible. The creature, for it was undeniably alive, had been cultivated over centuries to serve as a living power plant. How do you maintain it? Marcus asked, his engineer's mind struggling to process the implications. We don't maintain it, Thessarian replied, scales shifting to amused gold. We nurture it. The fusion heart grows stronger over time, adapts to our needs, and heals itself when damaged. Your mechanical reactors require constant repair because they fight against natural law. Our biological systems work with natural law instead. Marcus spent days studying the ship's technical documentation, though documentation was perhaps the wrong word. The dragons recorded knowledge through living memory crystals that transmitted information directly into the reader's consciousness. The experience was overwhelming at first, like drinking from a waterfall of pure knowledge. He learned that the Draconic Concordat wasn't a single species, but a coalition of dozens of races that had achieved what they called stellar maturity. Each member species had proven capable of spaceflight without destroying themselves or enslaving others. The admission criteria were brutally simple. Demonstrate wisdom equal to your technological capability. Most species failed. Humans are particularly interesting, explained Kelthra, the ship's primary navigator. Her scales were a deep purple that shifted to silver when she was concentrating. Your technological advancement has outpaced your social development by several centuries. You've achieved interstellar capability while still practicing slavery. Marcus winced at the accuracy of the assessment. Earth's government had indeed traded human freedom for alien technology, selling their own people to pay for fusion drives and gravity manipulators. The bitter irony was that humans had reached the stars as property rather than explorers. But you're here, Kelthra continued, her scales brightening, which suggests your species has potential beyond what your leaders have demonstrated. The real test came when Thessarian invited Marcus to examine their faster-than-light drive system. The human had expected something analogous to the theoretical designs he'd studied on Earth, exotic matter conduits or space-time manipulation chambers. Instead, he found something that challenged his understanding of physics itself. The FDL drive was a massive dragon, not a ship component that resembled a dragon, but an actual ancient dragon whose body had been modified over millennia to serve as a living spacecraft propulsion system. Veins of crystalline matter ran through its hide, and its breathing created subspace distortions that allowed the ship to slip between dimensions. Meet Vorthemis the Waywalker, Thessarian said with obvious reverence. She has guided ships through the void for over 3,000 years. The ancient dragons eyes opened as they approached, focusing on Marcus with an intelligence that made him feel like an insect being examined under a microscope. When she spoke, her voice resonated through dimensions Marcus couldn't name. "So this is the human who chose honor over survival," Vorthemis rumbled. "Your species rarely makes such choices. Tell me, small engineer, what do you see when you look at me?" Marcus forced himself to meet her gaze, knowing this moment was crucial. "I see someone who sacrificed her natural existence to serve others. The question is whether that sacrifice was voluntary or forced." The ancient dragon's laughter shook the chamber. "Wise answer. Yes, I chose this path willingly. My body became part of this ship because I believe in the Concordat's vision of nurturing younger species toward wisdom. But I retain my consciousness, my will, and my ability to refuse cooperation." She shifted slightly, and Marcus felt the ship's movement change in response. "Your people will face a choice soon, Marcus Chen. They can continue down their current path of exploitation and short-term thinking, or they can learn to think in terms of centuries and civilizations. Which do you believe they will choose?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. His experience as a prisoner had shown him humanity's capacity for both cruelty and kindness. He'd seen guards who enjoyed their power over others, but he'd also seen fellow prisoners share their meager rations with newcomers. "Humans are adaptable," he said finally. "We respond to the incentives and pressures around us. If we're surrounded by systems that reward exploitation, we become exploiters. But if we're shown better ways to live, many of us will embrace them." Vorthemis's scales brightened slightly. A politician's answer, but not untrue. The question becomes, how do we create the right pressures and incentives? Over the following weeks, Marcus began to understand his true role aboard the Stellar Harmony. He wasn't just a technical consultant, but a test case, a way for the dragons to evaluate human potential under ideal conditions. Everything he did would be studied, analyzed, and used to determine humanity's future relationship with the Concordat. The responsibility was staggering. His work with the ship's systems progressed rapidly once he stopped trying to understand them through human engineering principles. The living technology responded to intention and empathy as much as technical knowledge. When he approached problems with the same patience and nurturing attitude the dragons showed, solutions emerged organically. A breakthrough came when he was asked to help repair damage from their last rescue operation. A section of the ship's hull had been breached during the liberation of a Gorvani mining colony, and the living armor was struggling to heal properly. Marcus's first instinct was to replace the damaged section, but Thessarian stopped him. "The ship is in pain. Heal it, don't amputate." Working with tools that were themselves alive, Marcus learned to encourage cellular regeneration rather than impose mechanical repairs. He sang to the damaged sections, something that felt absurd until he realized the ship's living systems responded to harmonic vibrations. His engineering knowledge guided the technical aspects, while his growing empathy provided the emotional resonance the healing process required. When the hull sealed itself and began growing stronger than before, Marcus understood that he'd crossed a fundamental threshold. He was no longer thinking like a human engineer, but like something new, a hybrid of human technical knowledge and draconic biological wisdom. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. "You're adapting faster than we projected," Kelthra observed during one of their regular evaluation sessions. "Most species require generations to internalize our approaches to technology and cooperation." Marcus had been wondering about this himself. "Maybe it's because I spent 3 years as a prisoner. I learned to think beyond my individual needs, to consider how my actions affected everyone around me." It was during their next rescue mission that Marcus truly understood what he was becoming. The target was a massive factory ship where Vorthak overseers forced captured populations to manufacture weapons for their expanding empire. Intelligence suggested several thousand prisoners from multiple species were being held in horrific conditions. As the Stellar Harmony approached, the factory ship. Marcus found himself in the tactical planning session alongside senior Concordat officers. His knowledge of Vorthack technology and prisoner management protocols made him invaluable for planning the rescue operation. The factory ship's defenses are designed to prevent escape, not invasion, Marcus explained, highlighting weak points on the tactical display. If we disable the internal security systems first, the Vorthack will focus on containing prisoners rather than repelling boarders. Thessarian's scales shifted to a proving green. You think like a liberator now, not just an engineer. The mission launched with Marcus aboard one of the boarding craft. He'd insisted on coming despite having no combat training, arguing that his knowledge of prisoner psychology would be crucial for managing the evacuation. The Dragons had agreed, perhaps as another test of his developing character. The factory ship was a nightmare of industrial horror. Prisoners worked in zero-gravity manufacturing bays, their bodies slowly deteriorating from radiation exposure and malnutrition. The Vorthack overseers showed no concern for worker welfare. If someone collapsed, they were simply recycled into organic components for the manufacturing process. Marcus's job was to coordinate prisoner evacuation while Dragon commandos neutralized the guards. His first challenge came when they reached a section holding several hundred Zephyrian workers. The insectoid aliens had been imprisoned so long they couldn't believe rescue was possible. "This is a trick," one of the workers insisted, her compound eyes reflecting terror. "The Vorthack are testing us. Anyone who tries to leave will be punished." Marcus knelt down to her level, remembering his own disbelief when the Dragons first appeared. "I was Captivato on a Vorthack prison ship 3 months ago. I know exactly how you feel right now. But these Dragons are real, and they're here to take you home." He showed her his faded prisoner tattoo, the numbers still visible despite the medical treatments he'd received. The physical proof broke through her psychological barriers, and soon the entire group was moving toward the evacuation ships. Similar scenes played out throughout the factory ship. Marcus found that his experience as a prisoner gave him unique credibility with other captives. He understood their fears, their learned helplessness, and their desperate hope that someone might finally care about their suffering. But the mission's turning point came when they discovered something unexpected in the ship's deepest levels: a nursery. The Vorthack had been breeding prisoners, raising children in captivity to serve as a renewable workforce. Dozens of young beings from multiple species huddled in primitive cells, many too young to even understand what freedom meant. Marcus stared at the scene in horror, his engineer's mind struggling to process the systematic cruelty required to create such a place. These children had never known anything but captivity. How could they possibly be integrated into normal society? Thessarian placed a gentle claw on Marcus's shoulder. "Now you understand why the Concordat exists. This is what happens when species achieve technological power without wisdom." The evacuation of a nursery required all of Marcus's growing understanding of both human and draconic approaches to problem solving. The children needed immediate medical attention, but they also needed emotional care that could only come from patient, long-term nurturing. Watching the Dragons work with the rescued children revealed another layer of Concordat philosophy. These weren't just rescuers, but gardeners cultivating potential wherever they found it. Every child would receive education, medical care, and the opportunity to choose their own path once they came of age. "What happens to species like the Vorthack?" Marcus asked as they departed the destroyed factory ship. "Do you just eliminate them?" "Elimination solves nothing," replied Kelthera. "We limit their expansion, rescue their victims, and wait. Eventually, they'll face a choice: evolve beyond their current cruelty or face extinction through their own actions. And if they choose extinction, then the galaxy becomes safer for everyone else." As the Stellar Harmony carried its rescued passengers toward freedom, Marcus realized he'd witnessed something profound. The Concordat operated on timescales that span millennia, gently guiding promising species toward wisdom while containing those that chose destructive paths. He also realized that his own transformation was accelerating. The human who had been Captive 804 was gone, replaced by something new. Someone who thought in terms of species survival rather than personal advancement. Someone who could see connections between technology and philosophy that neither humans nor dragons could achieve alone. Vorthemis the Waywalker summoned him to her chamber that evening. You've exceeded all our projections, Marcus Chun. The question now becomes, are you ready to represent your species to the Concordat Council? Marcus felt the weight of the request. To speak for humanity before the gathered wisdom of dozens of star-spanning civilizations seemed impossible. But then he remembered the children in the Vorthak nursery and the thousands of prisoners still waiting for rescue throughout the galaxy. What would representing humanity involve, he asked. The Concordat has decided to make humanity an offer, Vorthemis explained. Join us as partners in nurturing galactic civilization, or continue your current path toward irrelevance. Your words could determine which choice your species makes. Looking back at the stars where Earth waited unknowingly, Marcus realized that his journey from prisoner to engineer had been preparation for something far greater. He was about to become humanity's first ambassador to powers beyond their understanding. The question was whether humanity deserved such representation and whether he was worthy to provide it. The Concordat assembly convened in the shadow of an ancient star that had died and been reborn 3 times. The meeting place was itself a marvel, a hollow world whose interior surface hosted representatives from 47 different species, each delegation occupying environments perfectly suited to their biological needs. Marcus stood on a platform of living crystal that adjusted its gravity and atmosphere to human requirements. Around him, the assembly stretched into impossible distances, with beings that defied easy categorization, crystalline entities that communicated through harmonic frequencies, gaseous intelligences contained in force field bodies, plants that had achieved sentience and spaceflight, and dragons, hundreds of them, their scales creating cascades of color that painted the assembly hall in constantly shifting patterns. At the center of it all sat the eldest, a dragon so ancient that her scales had turned to what appeared to be living starlight. When she spoke, reality itself seemed to listen. We gather today to consider the petition of Marcus Chun. Speaking for the species known as humanity, the eldest announced, her voice carrying across dimensions. This is unprecedented. Never before has a species been evaluated based on the testimony of a single individual. Murmurs rippled through the assembly in a dozen different communication methods. Marcus felt the weight of every gaze, knowing that his words would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community or remained isolated until they achieved wisdom independently. If they survived that long, Marcus Chun, the eldest, continued, you were designated Captive 804 by the Vorthak Empire. Today, you stand before us as humanity's chosen representative. Explain this transformation. Marcus took a deep breath, drawing on everything he'd learned during his months among the dragons. Honored eldest, my transformation began the moment I chose to help strangers rather than save myself. But it wasn't complete until I understood that individual growth is meaningless without community progress. He gestured to the vast assembly around him. Each species here has achieved something my people have not, the wisdom to use power responsibly. Humans have the creativity and adaptability to join you as partners, but we need guidance to overcome our current limitations. A delegate from the crystalline hegemony pulsed with skeptical frequencies. Your species practices slavery and sells its own children for technological advancement. What evidence suggests humans can transcend such fundamental moral failures? The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he'd expected it. Earth's crimes were well documented throughout the galaxy. I don't defend those actions. They represent the worst of what humans can become when fear and desperation overwhelm our better nature. But I've also seen humans risk everything to help strangers, sacrifice themselves for abstract principles, and create beauty that serves no practical purpose except to inspire others. Marcus activated the holographic display that the Sarian had helped him prepare. Images of human achievement filled the air above the assembly. Art, music, literature, scientific breakthroughs achieved despite limited resources. Humans excel at finding solutions under pressure. We adapt to extreme environments. We form emotional bonds across species barriers, something many supposedly advanced civilizations have never achieved. Our current government sold prisoners to alien traders, yes. But those same prisoners chose to resist, to maintain their humanity, even in captivity. He paused, meeting the gaze of delegates throughout the assembly. I spent 3 years as a prisoner learning that survival isn't enough. Humans need purpose beyond ourselves. Give us that purpose, and we'll exceed every expectation. A delegation of beings that existed as pure energy patterns shifted into what Marcus interpreted as amusement. Impressive rhetoric, but how do we know you represent your species accurately? You've been isolated from human civilization for months. This was the question Marcus had dreaded most. How could he speak for a species he'd been separated from? But as he considered his answer, he realized something profound. His isolation had given him perspective no earthbound human possessed. You're right that I'm not typical of current human leadership, Marcus admitted. But I am typical of human potential. Every species here faced a similar choice at some point: evolve beyond your limitations or remain trapped by them. I'm proof that humans can make that evolution. He activated another section of his presentation, showing data the dragons had collected about human colonies throughout known space. Humans don't just adapt to new environments. We improve them. Our colonies show lower crime rates, higher cooperation indices, and more innovative solutions to resource allocation than our homeworld. Separation from Earth's current political system brings out the best in my people. The eldest leaned forward, her starlight scales brightening with interest. You suggest that humanity's current problems stem from concentrated power structures rather than fundamental character flaws. Exactly. Marcus felt confidence building as he reached the core of his argument. Humans excel in small groups with clear objectives and shared challenges. We struggle with large-scale coordination because our current leaders prioritize short-term gains over long-term stability. But place humans in environments that reward cooperation and long-term thinking, and we become natural partners. A new voice entered the discussion. Vorthemis the Waywalker, speaking from her position as part of the Stellar Harmonies delegation. I have observed this human for months under various stress conditions. His assessment of human potential appears accurate. But potential means nothing without opportunity to actualize it. The ancient dragon's endorsement carried significant weight. Vorthemis had guided the Concordat's expansion for millennia and had personally evaluated dozens of species for membership. "What do you propose?" asked the eldest. Marcus activated the final section of his presentation, revealing the plan he'd developed with his dragon mentors. A partnership program. Select human colonies that demonstrate the cooperative values you prize. Offer them Concordat membership individually, creating examples of what human civilization can become. As these communities thrive, they'll influence Earth through demonstration rather than conquest. The assembly erupted in discussion as delegates considered the implications. Never before had the Concordat accepted partial membership from a species. It was always all or nothing. But Marcus had learned to think beyond traditional categories during his time among the dragons. Humans respect success more than authority. Show them functional alternatives to their current systems, and they'll adopt them voluntarily. A delegate from the Gorvani collective rumbled approval. This approach has merit. Our own species fragmented before achieving unity. Perhaps humans require similar development time. But what are the moral hazard? Demanded a representative from the ethereal communion. If we reward some humans while ignoring others, do we not implicitly condone the suffering of those left behind? Marcus had anticipated this objection as well. The current human government will fall eventually, their economic model is unsustainable. When it does, the successful human colonies will provide leadership templates for rebuilding. We're not abandoning anyone. We're creating lifeboats for the entire species. The eldest raised a claw for silence. Marcus Chun, your proposal requires us to trust that humans will choose wisdom over convenience when presented with successful examples. History suggests most species make the opposite choice. This was Marcus's moment. Everything he'd learned, everything he'd become, focused on his response to this challenge. Honored eldest, every species in this assembly was once young and foolish. Dragons hoarded wealth before learning to share it. The crystalline hegemony practiced rigid caste systems before discovering cooperation. The Gorvani fought resource wars before achieving abundance through technology. Each of you overcame your limitations because someone offered you a better path. Marcus spread his arms to encompass the vast assembly. I'm not asking you to trust humanity as we are. I'm asking you to invest in what we can become. My transformation from Captive 804 to your ambassador proves that humans can transcend their origins when given the right incentives and guidance. He paused, then delivered the words that would define humanity's future. You call this place the Concordat because it represents harmony between different ways of being. Humans offer something unique to that harmony: the ability to find innovative solutions under pressure, to form emotional connections across vast differences, and to maintain hope in seemingly impossible situations. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across cosmic distances. Marcus could feel the weight of accumulated wisdom considering his words, evaluating not just his arguments, but his character and the potential he represented. Finally, the eldest spoke. The assembly will deliberate. Marcus Chun, you have presented humanity's case with unexpected sophistication. Regardless of our decision, you have earned a place among us as an individual. The offer was generous beyond Marcus's wildest dreams. Personal membership in the Concordat would grant him access to knowledge and technology that could transform his understanding of the universe. He would live for centuries, maybe millennia, learning from the galaxy's greatest minds. But accepting would mean abandoning humanity to its fate. I'm honored by the offer, eldest, but I must respectfully decline. My value to the Concordat lies in my connection to my species. If humanity proves worthy of partnership, I'll serve as a bridge between our civilizations. If we don't, I'll work to make us worthy. The dragon scales shifted to what Marcus had learned indicated profound respect. Wisdom beyond your years, Ambassador Chun. The assembly is adjourned for deliberation. As delegates began filing out of the Great Hall, Thessarian approached Marcus. You exceeded even our highest projections, but understand that the decision may take decades. Concordat deliberations operate on galactic timescales. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of everything he'd set in motion. What happens to me while they decide? You continue your work. Learn. Grow. Help us rescue more prisoners and nurture more species toward wisdom. Become the bridge between human and draconic thinking that you've already begun to be. Over the following months, Marcus threw himself into this mission with passion that surprised even him. He developed new hybrid technologies that combined human engineering creativity with draconic biological wisdom. His designs for living ships became templates used throughout the Concordat fleet. More importantly, he began training other rescued humans in Concordat philosophy and technology. Not everyone adapted as quickly as he had, but enough showed promise to validate his arguments about human potential. The breakthrough came when one of his students, a former mining slave named Elena Vasquez, successfully negotiated the peaceful surrender of a Vorthax slave ship. Her combination of human empathy and Concordat principles convinced the ship's prisoners to work together rather than fight among themselves during the liberation. You see, Marcus told Thessarian as they reviewed the mission reports. Give humans purpose and training, and we become natural mediators and innovators. Word of human adaptability spread throughout the Concordat. Soon, Marcus found himself overseeing a growing program of human integration. Former prisoners became engineers, diplomats, and even ship commanders as they proved themselves worthy of increasing responsibility. The validation came 3 years after Marcus's speech to the assembly. The eldest summoned him to a private audience, her ancient presence radiating satisfaction. "The Concordat has reached its decision regarding humanity," she announced. "Your proposal for selective partnership has been approved. We will begin offering membership to human colonies that demonstrate the cooperative values we prize." Marcus felt triumph and terror in equal measure. And Earth itself? Earth will be given the opportunity to observe and learn. If they choose wisdom, they will be welcomed. If they choose continued exploitation, the eldest scales darken slightly. They will remain isolated until they evolve or destroy themselves. It was exactly what Marcus had proposed, but the reality of it felt overwhelming. He was about to become the de facto leader of humanity's integration into galactic civilization. "There is one more thing," the eldest continued. "The Concordat wishes to formalize your role. You will become the first human to receive a Concordat crown, the highest honor we can bestow." Marcus understood the significance. Only a few dozen beings in galactic history had received Concordat crowns, and they became legends whose influence shaped entire epochs of development. What would this involve, he asked, though part of him already knew. You would become more than human, but retain your humanity. The crown would extend your lifespan to match ours, enhance your cognitive abilities, and grant you authority to speak for the Concordat in all matters relating to human development. The transformation would be irreversible. Marcus would gain powers beyond imagining, but lose the ability to return to simple human existence. He would become something new, a hybrid of human innovation and draconic wisdom. "I accept," Marcus said without hesitation. The coronation ceremony took place in the same hall where Marcus had first spoken to the assembly. Representatives from every Concordat species attended, recognizing the historical significance of the moment. The crown itself was a marvel of living technology, crystalline structures that merged seamlessly with Marcus's nervous system, enhancing his mental capabilities while preserving his essential humanity. As it settled into place, Marcus felt his awareness expand across dimensions he'd never imagined. He could sense the emotional states of beings throughout the hall, the quantum fluctuations of the living ships in orbit, the vast network of consciousness that connected every Concordat world, and, beneath it all, the patient wisdom of species that had learned to think beyond individual existence. "Rise, Marcus Chun, first crown bearer of humanity," the eldest intoned. "May your reign bring your species to the wisdom they need to join us as true partners." As Marcus stood before the assembly, no longer fully human, but not yet something else entirely, he thought of his journey from Captivate 04 to this moment. The number tattooed on his arm had been replaced by the living crown on his head, but the lessons learned in captivity remained. Cooperation over competition. Wisdom over cleverness. The long view over immediate gain. Looking out at the stars where human colonies waited for guidance, Marcus began planning humanity's graduation from a young, chaotic species to mature partners in galactic civilization. It would take generations, maybe centuries, but he had time. And, for the first time since his imprisonment began, Marcus Chun smiled with genuine hope for his species' future. The dragons had given him a crown, but humanity would have to earn the right to wear it.